It all began in a quiet pharmacy as Cassandra Cassie Walker was locking up for the night. The shop had been in her family for decades, passed down from her mother, who first opened it back in 1978, at a time when black-owned businesses were still a rare sight along Highland Road. That night, she was finishing inventory, checking lot numbers and expiration dates like she did every Tuesday. It was tedious, yes, but necessary. She prided herself on her accuracy. She knew every bottle on every shelf. That attention to detail made what happened next all the more surreal. A sharp knock rattled the glass door. Cassie looked up, surprised. It was after hours. 2 uniformed officers stood outside, their silhouettes tall and rigid against the dimming sky. One of them was already gripping the handle like he had every right to walk in. Cassie unlocked the door cautiously, cracking it just wide enough to speak. "We're closed, officers. Can I help you?" The older of the two, a broad-shouldered man with thinning blonde hair, pushed the door open without waiting for permission. His badge read, "Sergeant Doyle." The second officer, younger, quieter, followed with a clipboard and avoided her eyes. "We received a tip," Doyle said flatly, "that you've been distributing counterfeit medication. You mind if we take a look around?" Cassie blinked. "A tip? That's absurd. This is a licensed pharmacy. Everything's regulated, logged, traceable." Doyle stepped further in, eyes sweeping the room like he expected to catch her red-handed. "Mind if we take a look anyway?" "I do," Cassie said, her voice firm. "Unless you have a warrant, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." That was when the atmosphere shifted. Doyle's jaw tightened. "You refusing a lawful inspection?" "I'm refusing an unlawful search," Cassie replied. "I know my rights." "You got something to hide, Ms. Walker." The younger officer, his name tag read, Green, looked uncomfortable now, but said nothing. "I have nothing to hide," Cassie said, "which is why I want this done the right way." Doyle stared at her long and hard. Then he turned to Green. "Cuff her." Cassie froze. "Excuse me. You're under investigation for distribution of counterfeit drugs. Step away from the counter." "You have no evidence," she said, her voice still calm. "No warrant, no cause? You're not going to arrest me in my own business based on a tip." But it didn't matter. Doyle grabbed her wrist, twisted it behind her back, with practiced ease. Cassie winced but didn't cry out. Green hesitated but followed orders. The cold bite of metal slid around her wrists. She heard the familiar electronic ping of a cell phone recording. Someone from the taco truck across the street was filming. That was something at least. They walked her out in handcuffs as the neighborhood watched in stunned silence. Her own customers, her people. Some lowered their eyes, others simply stared. Cassie held her head high. They drove her in silence. The cruiser hummed with tension. Green kept glancing at her through the rear view mirror but never spoke. Doyle, on the other hand, seemed almost smug. "Should have kept your head down," he muttered once. Cassie didn't answer. She stared out the window, watching familiar streets blur by. She had lived in Baton Rouge her whole life. Graduated top of her class at Xavier, got her pharmacist license at 26. She had worked too hard for too long to be dragged through the mud like this. They booked her quickly, took her fingerprints, snapped a mug shot under fluorescent lights that made her skin look washed out and tired. They tossed her in a holding cell with peeling paint and the stale smell of Lysol and desperation. She sat on the bench, her back straight, eyes forward. They didn't know. They didn't know who she was. They didn't know who her father was. Chief Nathaniel Walker wasn't a man who needed to raise his voice to get attention. He was Baton Rouge's first black police chief and a quiet legend in the community. He had cleaned up the department from the inside out, made enemies and allies, doing it, and earned every ounce of respect he commanded. When Cassie didn't answer her phone that night, her assistant manager called her father, said the store was closed early, said something didn't feel right. Nathaniel Walker was already dressed by the time he hung up. He didn't call the precinct. He didn't pull rank. He showed up. It was 10:13 p.m. when he walked into the East Side Division wearing a button-down shirt, a navy windbreaker, and a look that could freeze lava. Desk sergeant froze. Officers scattered. The air shifted. He walked straight to the holding area. No questions, no hesitation. When he saw Cassie through the bars, the fire in his eyes was unmistakable. "What the hell is this?" he asked, his voice quiet. The desk sergeant scrambled for words. She's under investigation." "For what?" "Possible counterfeit drug. Distribution?" Nathaniel narrowed his eyes. "Based on what?" "There was a call," the sergeant stammered. "Anonymous. Anonymous." He repeated the word like it was a punchline. "And no warrant?" "No, sir. No inventory audit? No, sir. No controlled substance violations? No DEA involvement?" The sergeant shook his head slowly. "Open the cell, sir. Now." Cassie stood as the door opened. She didn't move until the cuffs came off. Her wrists were raw. Nathaniel looked at them, then at the sergeant. "You need to call the captain," he said, "and internal affairs, because this isn't going away." Cassie walked out beside her father. She didn't look back. Cassie rode beside her father in silence as the lights of Baton Rouge passed in a blur. The city that had always been her home suddenly felt like enemy territory. The streets, once familiar, seemed to whisper things she didn't want to hear. She rubbed her wrists gently, the skin still red and warm where the handcuffs had bit into her. Nathaniel drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly against his knee, his jaw clenched tight. He hadn't said much after getting her out, but the storm in his eyes said plenty. When they pulled into her driveway, Cassie reached for the door handle, but he stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Tomorrow we go public," he said, voice low and steady. "You didn't just get arrested, Cassie. They sent a message. We're going to send one back." She nodded once slowly. Inside her house, the quiet settled around her like a blanket. But it wasn't comforting. It was too still, too loud in its own way. Her phone was filled with messages, customers asking if she was okay, neighbors shocked, a few saying they'd seen the video already making the rounds online. She scrolled through social media and saw herself, her face calm but proud, shoulders straight, being walked out in cuffs, while Officer Doyle smirked behind her. The video was under a caption, "Pharmacist arrested for fake meds or just for being black in Baton Rouge." It had nearly 20,000 views. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She barely slept that night. Her thoughts churned, looping between disbelief and anger. Every memory of her mother working the counter, of little kids, buying candy with nickels, of elderly customers thanking her for delivering meds during hurricane season, it all felt like it was under threat, like they hadn't just arrested her, they'd tried to erase her entire legacy. The next morning, Nathaniel was already waiting in her driveway when she stepped out. He had called a press conference, not a quiet one. Cameras, mics, reporters, local news, regional, and even one from out of state. He wasn't going to let it slip through the cracks. The Walker name meant something here, and he was about to remind the city why. Cassie stood next to him in a crisp navy blazer and white blouse. No makeup, no apologies. Her eyes were tired, but clear. She didn't need to play victim. She just needed to be heard. Nathaniel took the podium first. He didn't shout, didn't pound his fist. He simply laid out the facts. His daughter, a licensed pharmacist with no criminal history, had been arrested without a warrant, without evidence, based solely on an anonymous phone call. Her store was searched without consent. She was handcuffed in public, paraded through her neighborhood, and treated as guilty without a single piece of proof. "This isn't about one officer making a bad call," he said, his voice cutting through the humid morning like a scalpel. "This is about a system that assumed my daughter must be doing something wrong, simply because of who she is." Then Cassie stepped up. She spoke plainly, her voice steady. "They didn't just try to ruin my name. They tried to make an example out of me. I've spent my life following the rules, building a business, serving a community that raised me. And yet, in one night, 2 officers with no evidence decided I was a criminal. That's not justice. That's profiling. That's abuse of power. The crowd murmured, reporters scribbling frantically. Questions flew from all directions. What evidence did the police have? Was there prior conflict with Officer Doyle? Was she planning legal action? Nathaniel answered the last one himself. Absolutely. Within 48 hours, the situation had escalated. The police department released a statement calling the incident an unfortunate misunderstanding, which only poured gasoline on the fire. The community wasn't having it. By the weekend, a protest had formed outside the East Side Division. Signs reading "Justice for Cassie" and "Stop Criminalizing Black Business" filled the sidewalks. Customers lined up outside Walker's Pharmacy, not just to pick up prescriptions, but to show support. They brought cards, flowers, hugs. An elderly man handed her a handwritten note. "I trust you more than I trust any doctor." Cassie held it together until she got inside and wept in the stockroom. Meanwhile, Nathaniel was digging deeper. As chief, he had contacts inside Internal Affairs and the City Ethics Committee. He requested every body cam file from the night of Cassie's arrest. What came back was damning. Officer Doyle's camera had been turned off. Officer Green's had spotty audio, but what it caught was enough. Doyle ordering the arrest before even speaking to Cassie, dismissing Green's hesitation, mocking Cassie once she was cuffed. The footage was quietly leaked to the press. The response was explosive. Local TV anchors aired it with shaking voices. A columnist from New Orleans called it a masterclass in targeted injustice. The mayor's office issued another statement, this time pledging a full investigation. But that wasn't enough. Nathaniel knew how these things worked. Investigations could drag for months, even years. Officers were often suspended with pay, protected by union shields and bureaucratic fog. That wouldn't happen this time. He made another call, this one, to the state attorney general's office. A civil rights unit was dispatched to Baton Rouge within the week. As protests grew and videos circulated nationwide, national media began to take notice. Cassie appeared on a CNN evening segment, calm and composed, recounting the night she was treated like a criminal in her own store. "I didn't resist. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there," she said. "And somehow that was threatening enough to put me in cuffs." Her voice didn't waver. Viewers across the country watched, and many saw their own daughters, mothers, sisters in her eyes. Then came the turning point. A whistleblower inside the department, an anonymous sergeant, leaked a series of emails. In them, Officer Doyle had referred to a plan to keep eyes on the Walker girl, suggesting Cassie's store might be a front. No evidence, just suspicion backed by bias. Worse still, an internal memo confirmed that the department had received 0 complaints about Walker's Pharmacy ever. The allegations were baseless from the start. When confronted, Officer Green came forward and gave a sworn statement. He confirmed everything. The lack of probable cause, Doyle's obsession with Cassie, the taunts made on the drive to the station. The pressure broke him. He admitted he had a bad feeling the moment Doyle barked the arrest order, but he didn't stop it. And now, he said he regretted it deeply. Cassie didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The truth was working its way to the surface, and for the first time in weeks, she could feel the weight start to lift from her shoulders. Her father, ever the tactician, pressed forward with legal action. The family filed a formal federal complaint citing wrongful arrest, defamation, and violation of Fourth Amendment rights. The Department of Justice opened a civil rights investigation. Meanwhile, Officer Doyle was placed on unpaid leave pending inquiry. It was a small win, but it was a beginning. Cassie stood at her pharmacy counter that evening, the hum of the fluorescent lights above, the soft ding of the door as customers came and went. She wasn't just a business owner anymore. She was a voice, a symbol of something larger. And she was just getting started. By the following month, the rhythm of Cassie's life had changed completely. The pharmacy still opened at 9 a.m. sharp, and she still greeted customers by name, still filled prescriptions with the same care she always had. But now, reporters sometimes lingered outside in cars waiting for a comment. Community activists popped in not for medicine, but for her story, asking her to speak at forums, to join panels, to lend her name to petitions. She had become, unwillingly, at first the face of a local movement, one that now stretched far beyond Highland Road. Nathaniel helped her navigate it all with the quiet authority of a man who had weathered decades of fights in boardrooms, precincts, and policy meetings. He was proud, but cautious. He knew how fast a public momentum could shift, how easily people moved on if the fire cooled. That's why he insisted she stay visible, stay vocal, stay clear. And she did. Not because she liked the spotlight, but because she knew what would happen if she didn't. The case against Officer Doyle moved quicker than expected. The leaked emails had exposed not only his bias against Cassie, but a pattern of questionable arrests across his 10-year career. 3 civil complaints were quietly reopened. One involved a homeless man tackled outside a convenience store. Another detailed the arrest of a teenage boy accused of loitering outside a mall. None had resulted in charges, but all bore Doyle's signature and followed the same template: profiling, excessive force, lack of probable cause. The media dubbed it the Doyle pattern. It didn't take long for other victims to step forward, especially after seeing Cassie's composure in interviews. People came out of the woodwork: former suspects, business owners, parents, even another officer who'd retired early, disgusted by what he called a culture of intimidation. With mounting pressure, the mayor called for an emergency council session. Nathaniel attended in plain clothes, sitting quietly in the back. When his name was read aloud during public comment, there was a ripple of recognition through the room. Cassie stood at the podium. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. She simply said, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because what happened, to me, is part of a larger sickness. And if someone like me, with resources, with a police chief for a father, can be dragged out of her own store in cuffs with no evidence, what do you think is happening to those who have no one?" Silence followed. Then applause. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. That night, Cassie got a call from a civil rights attorney in Atlanta. He wanted to file a class action lawsuit, not just on her behalf, but on behalf of everyone who had experienced similar abuse from Baton Rouge officers. "You've started something," he said, "and we can help you finish it." With her father's guidance, she agreed. The case was filed 3 weeks later. 35 plaintiffs, 41 incidents spanning a decade. Media coverage exploded. CNN ran a special segment. The Washington Post published a long-form piece titled "Justice on Highland Road." Even talk shows mentioned her name, always followed by words like brave, resilient, relentless. But with visibility came danger. One morning, Cassie found her car, windows smashed in, nothing stolen, just a message. Another time, someone left a fake pill bottle on her doorstep labeled liar. Her father doubled her home security. Friends walked her to her car after work. She didn't scare easily, but the undercurrent of threat was real. Still, she didn't back down. She continued to show up to meetings, to interviews, to courtrooms. Then came the DOJ ruling. After months of investigation, they announced formal charges would be recommended against Officer Doyle, including civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and unlawful arrest. He was immediately terminated from the department, not suspended, not reassigned, fired. The same day, the City Council voted unanimously to approve the creation of a civilian oversight board with subpoena power and independent investigative rights. Cassie was asked to sit on it. She declined at first, overwhelmed, unsure, but Nathaniel encouraged her. "You have a voice now." He said, "Don't give it back." She accepted. The months that followed were a whirlwind. The lawsuit moved into depositions. Every time she had to recount the night she was arrested, a part of her recoiled, but she did it anyway. She answered every question. She watched as Doyle's defense unraveled under the weight of emails, video footage, and officer testimonies. The jury didn't take long, guilty on all counts. The courtroom was packed the day the verdict was read. Reporters, activists, her customers, her daughter. Nathaniel held her hand, but Cassie didn't cry. She just exhaled for the first time in what felt like a year. Afterward, she stepped outside into the spring sun where a crowd had gathered. People clapped, some chanted her name. A young woman pushed forward through the throng. She was maybe 20, nervous but determined. "Miss Walker," she said, "Mai was arrested last year for nothing. Watching you, it gave us the courage to fight back." Cassie took her hand, squeezed it. "Then it was worth it," she said. "All of it." Back at the pharmacy, things slowly returned to something resembling normal, but it wasn't the same. Customers came with new respect, with quiet reverence. The store had become more than a business. It was a symbol. Cassie expanded her staff. She added a small consultation room where low-income residents could get free health advice. She partnered with a local clinic for wellness screenings. She hosted monthly community forums in the parking lot. She wasn't just dispensing medicine anymore. She was helping heal the community. One evening, Nathaniel joined her for dinner in the back office, both eating gumbo out of styrofoam containers. "You changed this place," he said. She smiled. "It changed me first." They sat in companionable silence. Outside, his neon sign buzzed gently in the warm night. Across the street, the taco truck was still open, a small line forming. Baton Rouge hadn't turned into paradise. But it had changed. And more importantly, it had learned to listen. That night, as Cassie closed the register and turned off the lights, she looked around the store and felt something she hadn't felt since the night she was arrested. Peace. The scars were still there. The story still raw, but so was the strength, the clarity, and most of all, the conviction. She didn't need to be a symbol. She didn't need to be anyone's hero. She was just Cassie Walker, pharmacist, daughter, fighter. And that was enough. Because in the end, justice wasn't a moment. It was a movement. And she was walking right in the middle of it,